here. I do see the familiar faces, but I'm not sure. Last time we've been speaking about functional programming in C#. Not much. Okay, cool. So yeah, my name is Max, and I'm a founder of the product, which is a spin-off from the East Bank Technologies, the company which is hosting the meetup today. And probably it's a little bit irrelevant for most of you folks, but probably some of you still work with front-end development, at least partially at your job duties, and probably you have designers on your team and front-end developers on your team. So we built a tool for collaboration of designers and developers, and it's called Simply. The main...
I got three there.
Okay. All right. Nothing works, actually.
Nothing.
Even arrows doesn't work.
I know why. I'm so sorry.
I apologize.
I have it focused there.
Okay. So yeah. So basically, we solve design handoff problem. So what is the design handoff? Is once we have our design mockups ready, and it's time to give them away for the engineering department to implement them, no matter if it's a web app or if it's a mobile app. And at some point, the app that developers are working on is ready from the functional perspective, and it's time to actually add the design to it. And yeah, it raises a lot of questions between design and development departments, and this is a very time-consuming and distracting and annoying conversations that we would rather not have than spend our time on doing something more valuable. And this goes even more difficult once we get updates to the designs, and they need to be communicated from design department to development department. And there are multiple options on how can these changes be communicated to the developers. They can be sent over Skype, email, attached to Jira tickets, edit as a page on the Confluence, and like you name it. And it's up to developers to keep track on these changes, and it takes, again, huge amounts of time, and it's very frustrating for both parties. So yeah, this is why we developed Simply. Simply is a tool that helps connect designers to developers. It provides a single entry point to all design-related materials, and developers don't have to remember where is the latest version of the design mockups is. It's just there. For designers, it works with Photoshop, Sketch, and soon it will work with Adobe Experience Design and Affinity Designer from Serif. And it provides the option to designers to hand off their design mockups in one click, and automatically generates assets, color palettes. You can even distribute the fonts and many other stuff without knowing much about of the technical details about the particular platform. And we support web, Android, and iOS. For developers, we provide first of all, rich web application where developers can access design mockups without having a graphic editor installed or knowing how to use it. This is especially important with Photoshop because I personally have no idea how to use Photoshop. So dynamic visual specifications. So all the design mockups, they are clickable. Developers can click through all the elements and get explicit information about every single design element in the mockup. And it includes dimensions, positions, text styles, and many other stuff. We provide access to the pre-generated assets, and they're generated for all different DPIs, which is very important for the mobile platforms. For instance, for Android, we generate like set of the 6 images for each particular picture. We generate a color palette, and we name colors for developers, and we generate a font style book. Also, we provide rapid design implementation tools, which are extensions for IDEs like Xcode and Android Studio. In Xcode, we are integrated with interface builder, so developers can drag and drop components from design mockup into the storyboard or zip file. And they can also apply multiple properties to the existing views, which are already in the interface builder. Oh, sorry, that was a video. No? Yeah, it was. Hold on, how to run it? This is I'm a Mac user. I'm sorry. Play.
There's a play button on the upper left right there.
No, this is the Xcode thing. Hold on. Pause the timer. Start the timer. Well, yeah. So actually, it was a video that shows how you can conveniently drag and drop the styles from the mockup into the interface builder, and I apologize for the technical difficulty that I have with Windows computers. So yeah, we are in production for the last 6 months. We have plenty of the big names on our customer list. We have Netflix, Udemy, Hotwire, Microsoft, Salesforce, Visa, and several other big guys we cannot name yet because we don't have approval from their PR and lawyers department. Check it out. It saves a lot of time for both designers and developers. It's basically, if you do a lot of UI work, it cuts off probably up to 20% of the time on the collaboration per design iteration of the product. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's speak about AWS versus Azure. Thank you.
Okay, let me try mine. See if that doesn't work. Yeah, it works. Before I start, I got a few new people here, but basically we did the exercise before, so I need to know a little more about yourself. And what we did was I asked questions. What cloud platform are you using? And now we see you have AWS here, or we got here, in the middle, we have Azure. So basically AWS and Azure on par. So we have half of us working with Amazon, half of Azure. Now we have some roles, and basically I see dev, architects, managers, systems, and we have some questions. Some of them were answered, some of them not get answered. We will go back to that after I will do a presentation. I might end up answering them along the way, some of them, but if you see that your answer is not answered, yes, after the presentation we'll answer them. Okay, so main theme of the day today is the Azure and Amazon, and I specifically put and or because at this point I see it's more of a multi-cloud solutions that coming on, and your maybe urgent question was how do you come up with your best cloud solution for you, and that we're going to handle in this conversation. Let me introduce myself. I'm Natalia. I work here at Bank. Last 8 years I started as a .NET developer, and over the years I switched the role and I call myself now solution consultant. I span over from Azure to Amazon services the last 3 years because I got a customer who was primarily in Amazon, and over the years we had a conversation whether supplementing with Azure will have some benefits for them. And we end up having multi-cloud client who use some of the Azure services, but still primarily on Amazon. And a year ago, he asked me, the architect of this organization, asked me to do comparison between two for specific reasons. I'll go over these reasons in a few minutes. And to make this more interactive, I decided to do a blocks of information, like 7-minute blocks, and after that we'll have a quick Q&A on the specific content you heard. Maybe some have questions or maybe feedback you want to share with others. Okay, and every time you see this slide, it's just the indicator that it's the break for this questions and answer for this content that you just heard. And let me start with this. So any questions on this so far? Okay. The first case, I call it, the way I structured the content, I got 2 customers from our East Bank pool, and what we do consultation and development of different kind of customized solution for the customers. And we have public and private, established company and startups. And I took 2 cases, one of them for established company, and this is the first case, the weather case. It's called weather case because the customer is working with the weather data. They do hardware and they do software on top. So they're selling weather. It's really good business. And that was last year that they came over and asking, maybe we can do Azure instead of Amazon. It was an interesting case because they already spent 5 years on Amazon. And there was a breaking point last year that started considering that. And here's the first slides are more about the business analysis framework because in this particular customer and in my general work, I do multiple roles. I do project management and BA, and I like to have a framework. How do you work with a specific problem or statement? So in this case, the customer was considering Azure after 5 years running in Amazon, and I developed a framework. How do you work with this complex question, what cloud is the best for you? And I put this his specific issues in 3 buckets. As you see, we have a cloud bucket, so it's mainly cloud capabilities or issues that you have in the specific cloud. And in this instance, they were having product outages on Amazon last year, and it was with famous outages in October, was multiple times, and it struck really heavy use services, messaging, and storage, as well as NoSQL. And the problem for this specific customer was that they used this behind-the-scenes services for their software, all the software they use for the customers. So basically, these outages put their business on hold, and it was really unstable environment for months. And the second issue that they were saying, internal technology expertise, the second bucket, and is primarily your IT team preferences, how you work inside your company. And they were software company with a .NET developer, and it was an issue before. Amazon always provided SDK for .NET with the first releases of the services. But last year, Amazon changed the policy. They were saying, no longer we treat the .NET SDK as the primary SDK for our services. And new services come with other languages, including Node.js. So basically, you have to switch over to Node.js, for example, to be on top. Or you're stuck with .NET and you need to wait for a second release SDK in order to get the use of new services. So it was a hard problem inside the company whether they should change the languages inside the team or they should just wait, and they couldn't have a roadmap from AWS, even though this customer is the biggest customer, .NET customer, and this is Coast for them, and they have a strong relationship with Amazon. And lastly, it was issue with business drivers. They were saying we couldn't handle well the prediction of the cost. Every end of the month we got the bill, and that bill is not a good prediction of what's going to happen next month. So that was the problem. And coming from this framework of having these 3 categories, we formulated the questions. So what questions we need to have in order to compare the cloud. And the first idea that I want to put on table now, you cannot compare any cloud platform just based on the services. You need to have more context. And this was the analysis that brought more context. In this case, we were saying, that issue with the outages. What are we expecting from multi-cloud? We're expecting more stability. And another was coming from architect, I want to have enhanced architecture. So we need to unpack that. What is enhanced architecture? And for internal technology, because we're aware that we need to do analysis on Azure, we're pretty safe. We know that will supported by Azure. And lastly, business drivers, not only we want to have more predictability, but we suspect we might have a less cost when we're going to do Azure, right? There was our, what I call hypothesis, right? So that was the questions. And basically, I'm just highlighting this idea. When you do comparison in your work, when you want to choose the provider, you need to understand your context, your use cases, and the needs that are driving that comparison. Because it's really tiresome to have to compare it to the biggest cloud. So that leads us to another step in analysis. We ask customer to provide few use cases that we need to look over and see what is now or what we're going to have on different platform. He provided several use cases, and we picked the biggest one, the most expensive one, and this is the heart of the business. So basically, they have receivers that receiving data from hardware, weather hardware, and then they put it into ingest and then multiplying with outer ingest and go over to some storage. I simplified that for you, so it's easier now. So basically, the whole idea, you have your devices, in this case 13K devices that updates, do send updates every 2 seconds. You have your receiver, in this case in Amazon EC2, and then that goes into messaging. That was the issue because the messaging was down, the whole system was down. And that after that, you got your ingest services that having this all data accumulated together from different devices, you supplementing with other ingest services, and then you store in NoSQL solution, NoSQL, in this case DynamoDB Amazon. Once you got expiration date, maybe 3 days, you put this current data into historical NoSQL, and then you have downstream services. This is the outer scale EC2 instances that expose the data through API, right? I highlighted specific areas because I remember my objectives. So in this case, I saw that we have pretty expensive solution for NoSQL here. And this is numbers per month. So they paying 11K per month for the DynamoDB, and they're paying 30K per month for another DynamoDB, right? So for me, because I was in the mode to prove that we can do it even better with Azure, I was saying, okay, let's do this number now as is. It was 70% of the all domain was consumed by NoSQL. And this is the opportunity to explore whether we can have a cheapest option in Azure. And if some of you on Amazon now, you might have a counter argument, you should do more better at Amazon. And I know it's the valid argument, but because I have objectives to compare with Azure, I was in the mode to have that comparison in Azure in a more optimal way. So that was the first focus. And the second focus was I saw that infrastructure as a service a lot, and this is the main hint that we can do better and move it over to PaaS, right? And this is opportunity to modernize. This is second category of how do you achieve more, use more capabilities of the cloud to make it more modern. Okay, so that's the first block. Any questions on this? So as is. Clear? Okay, let's go another one. And then what we did in the vision on Azure, in the same case, and nitty-gritty of details of that was, as I mentioned before, you don't do service by service different clouds. You have to type with your use cases. In this case, there was simple table of the services in the domain. So basically, any ingest services, any NoSQL services that we have the record here with the type, and then with the two categories of IaaS and PaaS. Majority of the current architecture is on IaaS, and we come up with a number for AWS as is architecture, and then we did the related services based on requirements on Azure. So there was the second step of comparison, and then we did the PaaS for Azure. We couldn't do a lot of platform as a service on Amazon because they haven't developed any Lambda yet, and it was hard to predict their uptime for the services to run. And even though I mentioned multiple times now that you don't do service by service comparison between cloud, but I think it's good to have this table, and you have it in your handout that posted in Azure, and now you can see comparison service by service, Azure and Amazon. And for some instances, you might have several services. For example, for Elastic Beanstalk, Azure is saying you can have web apps or cloud services. So it's multiple alternatives that proves the point that you need to know your use case first and then you have to deliver the cloud architecture on the platform. And this is the link you'll have in your handout. Okay, so we run that exercise, and last year we didn't have this nice table, so we spent a lot of time to develop our mind around how do you compare what's the alternatives. And then we delivered the architecture on Azure, and now you see first focus was NoSQL. And in this case, if you look over this, because I put the asterisk in, for DynamoDB, you have two alternatives. You might have DocumentDB as a NoSQL solution, and then you might have a table storage, cheapest, right? And because we knew the use case in this instance, we know that Azure Table will be sufficient, right? That dramatically reduced the TCO. And we're saying DynamoDB is an overkill. You can use Table for your use case, 5 cents cheaper. But as a counter argument, if you go back to Amazon architecture, you need to optimize. One of the other ways to optimize your current architecture. In this instance, you might have Redis plus S3 that also will reduce the bill. But the main point for the architect was the second opinion. So we identified the problem, the current problem, and then up to the customer to decide what he can do about that, whether optimize on the current platform or go over to another platform. And the second point was modernization. And for endpoint, we saw that we can use API apps in Azure, and a little bit, price a little bit higher, 500, but it's not a significant problem. So you can see, you can compare for this specific use case that you might spend pretty much the same amount of money, but your architecture is going to be modern, more modern. But interestingly, the most significant finding in our analysis was we saw this devices connecting, sending data, this classical example of a buzzword IoT. And we saw we can do that on Amazon and Azure. And for this specific use case, we saw that Azure is twice cheaper for this specific use case. And it was a strong argument. And they kind of got engaged with our sales and possibilities that maybe they can do it in Azure versus Amazon. But just highlight, it's just because of this specific use case. I'm not saying this in general is going to be a big difference. And that was just artifact of analysis that I just show you that this was improvement of their architecture, modernization of that, and we put the Azure table, and we did put the Redis on top, so that will reduce the cost. And then if you look at the numbers, it might be impressive, like twice cheaper, but if you remember the context, the cloud on Amazon wasn't optimized. And we haven't done the work optimizing the Amazon cloud because it wasn't our objective, preparing this objective thing and how do you do analysis. And even though, another point, if you just stick with the price tag, what about the migration effort? This is the heart of the whole business. Plus, what about overhead of supporting two clouds, right? Not a lot of the customers now do have really multi-cloud solutions. So you need to consider that factor too. Even though you can prove that this specific service may be easier to run or faster or cheaper, you need to think through other metrics when you start developing this multi-cloud solution. So, and then what we recommended, we were saying, you know what, we see some improvements in some areas. We recommended proof of concept, so it's the safest choice. And we're pretty sure about IoT because of the price. We saw the differences in prices, as well as some modernization for service fabrics, web jobs. So it can enhance architecture, but we brought another factor, this outages they were having. If you go to SLA, between Amazon and Azure, SLAs are the same, but what about historical actual track? So if you go over and see outages on Azure and Amazon, if you compare like the last 3 months, we know for sure the last 3 months Azure reported more outages than Amazon, right? But it's up to you to decide how do you interpret that. For example, one of the objectives may be Azure might report more than Amazon. Amazon might still have some outages, but they don't report on them. And another objective is how do you predict the trend in the future? So you saw there's outages last 3 months. What about the next 6 months? So it's up to an analyst to make a call and say, okay, based on that, my perspective is this. Based on historical trend, we might predict in certain variation that the stability is going to be less stable on Azure, right? And regarding the business drivers, we proved that we can lower TCO for IoT specifically, right? For other services, it still was a question whether they should optimize and then we should compare back, but it wasn't that at that point that we could handle this in the framework of analysis. Okay, any question on this? This was first case.
Good question. I saw that originally there were a couple of EC2 instances costing $300, and then there was like a huge IT solution costing 87,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely PaaS will cost more. Platform as a service will cost you more. It contradicts this first objective, I agree.
Okay. And, well, I'm assuming that this instance is not the whole cost because they obviously had some messaging costs. How much did that cost? Because in IoT, it also replaces the messaging cost, right?
Yeah, so the question is whether we should replace this one.
Yep.
I don't remember out of my head the messaging cost, but I do remember.
It's kind of funny to see that we've done this analysis and we decided to replace $300.
And we ask for more money. Yeah, that's usually how we run the business. You know, how do you do modernization of architecture and reducing your price of modernization? I don't know. Have you got an example when you modernize your architecture and it costs less?
I mean, it usually does. I'm not going to go into examples, but I would, I guess. There's like the D series of VMs, right? And there's the version 2 D series. They can replace D series with version 2.
Okay, so it's in the service.
Improve performance, reduce cost.
So if you're in the same family of a service type and they introduce new offerings, you can reduce the cost. But if it's like building new service and you're switching over to a different model.
Okay, I mean, I'm frankly, full disclosure, not a big fan of PaaS. I really have my reservations. And well-managed IaaS is usually cheaper. And,
right.
So, okay, some people choose PaaS and some less.
So it's valid feedback, I agree, yeah. And Microsoft, I got the experience with the cloud architecture when we ran this analysis, and they were saying, yeah, usually if you go over with the PaaS alternatives, it's going to be a higher cost, and on average, 10 up to 20% increase in cost when you go from IaaS. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, was the every 2 second requirement, or what is that?
Yeah, it's the as-is thing. They have a weather stations deployed, and every weather station sends every 2 seconds updates from that station.
So is there a requirement from the client?
Yeah.
And in terms of scalability, was there any limit on both options on how many devices you can support, for example? Because I'm pretty sure they started with 13,000 devices, but later on they would add more and more.
Can you answer this question on IoT scalability?
How do they compare?
There are limits.
You have limits on read and writes, but I don't know how much limit do you have on
Okay,
that?
do you mean with Azure Table and DynamoDB?
Devices.
Okay, got it. There are limits on maximum number of what you call it, basically IT processing nodes, but you can call the support and say I need more, and they will give you more. So there's no
Hard
there's
limit.
no right. There's no hard limit. There are only basically it's the most services that you see, like for compute, you have limit on CPUs. For I don't know what else. I guess for IoT, you have limit on processing.
You can scale as much as you preserve those read and write constraints, I guess.
Oh, so you're saying about even those,
Right. So
Yeah.
again, yeah. So if we're talking about reads and writes, I don't really agree with this analysis, and I don't think Azure Table would work in this case because Azure Table has a limit on number of reads and writes in its service limit, and it's less than 2,000 per second. So this like 3,500.
So you're saying that here
Right.
won't support this one?
It can be over. So I'm not 100% against this because you can overcome this read and writes limits by creating several storage accounts and have those limits on the storage, spread those limits by the storage accounts, like sharding it. Thank you, sir. That's the word I was looking for. So yeah, I'm not 100% for it, but not 100% against it. So you can overcome those limits by creating multiple storage accounts.
So are you asking only for Azure, or you want to have answer for Amazon too?
No, I was curious, how do they compare in terms of scalability? Because I only see limits on how many reads and writes.
DynamoDB and Azure Table are completely different types of services, and the reason that they're here on the same screen is because DynamoDB, everybody knows what I'm talking about. It was overkill for the use case that it was used with it. DynamoDB, if you want to compare it to Azure, it's more of a document DB.
Yeah, and this is the proof, because if you put in a simple database group, it's the DynamoDB and documents DB.
Right. Azure Table is more like simple DB in AWS terms. So
that brings to my last question, sorry. So these readings that you get, are they actually well formatted, and are they actually in tabular format, or do you have missing columns or missing values?
Well formatted, and they do have indexing, but it's simple indexing.
So in that case, you need just a simple table storage, and you don't need a document.
Simple DB, yeah. Yeah, and I know for sure for historic now, they do have, they just in the middle of migration to S3. So completely off DynamoDB to S3 plus for this on top.
Okay.
The question? Yep.
We discussed this issue with specifically, and I would add my 2 cents to this discussion. DynamoDB, as requested here, there is one thing that is missing in a comparison. DynamoDB guarantees you latency up to single-digit milliseconds, and Azure Table does not guarantee that at all.
Yes.
And another issue is Azure Table is limited to 2,000 requests per second, and DynamoDB doesn't have this limitation. So, given that your specific requirements, you may pay more just to make sure that the service will work.
right. So as I said, DynamoDB was an overkill for the use case, and we can.
Yeah, you're paying for a very high product here when you don't really need all the features.
That's right.
Okay, and there was a difficult path through to see this inefficiency. Okay, any other questions on this?
Just a comment. I'm not sure if you addressed that. I may have missed it, but Azure and Amazon, they're pretty. You can basically call them and adjust your price, adjust your limits. And in this case, I think the client ended up adjusting the price.
Yes, so client got this findings and it went over to Amazon and asked for price reduction.
Right, and got it. So there was some
That's a little
confused about the document DB. Is that, what is the exact comparison with that with the Dynamo?
Dynamo and document DB, can you address that?
I wasn't part of this research, and I don't know DynamoDB well enough. I don't know AWS in general well enough in order to give you like an on-spot comparison. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing.
It's NoSQL database, and if you use DocumentDB, you can download it on your local computer and run. So it's not part of the cloud. You can run it as part of your local machine. So this is a good thing for testing or POC.
So you're referring to Azure DocumentDB or open source DocumentDB? Or DynamoDB?
It's DocumentDB.
DocumentDB, okay. Okay.
But the pricing is more or less the same?
Pricing, DocumentDB was more expensive.
It was more expensive.
So if we applied on the specific use case and we saw that DocumentDB will be more expensive than
Now,
that.
Azure also has things like MongoDB and other products. Were people trying those too, or just the DocumentDB?
We haven't considered those in part of analysis. Okay.
So the node DynamoDB provides a local client, so you can run DynamoDB locally. It will not work in a cluster mode, but just for proof of concept, you can start DynamoDB.
So it's pretty much the same functionality that we just heard from DocumentDB.
I think here in this talk.
Yes, I think
You refer to Amazon. Yeah, sometimes we're saying, what we're saying, Azure. Because we got so many requests to compare them now, so. Okay, good valid point. So basically, what I heard from you and what ended up having in my mind, functionality-wise, there is not much of a differences of documented functionality. And the way I'm saying documented, because I see some complaints over that sometimes documented functionality is not implemented in the way it's been documented in Azure.
Like any examples?
Resource management API, for resource management API, applying the template. No. Okay.
I can describe my resource management API in Azure.
Have you seen the differences between documentation and actual API?
Yeah, I have seen differences.
Okay.
There is a big difference between command line interface, parameters, and documents. So if you want to run any CLA, command line interface in Azure, you have to look at sources and like understand which parameters you have to pass.
Okay.
Because I think documents just too late.
Okay. So you
I
got
would say the generic issue with resource management API in Azure is lack of documentation. Like all they have it's like a couple of pages and they have documentation describing like the common use cases. And then they say, okay, if you want to do something more deep, get more deep knowledge, then there is a GitHub with a whole bunch of samples created by some random users on the internet. So go ahead and take a look at those. But we don't provide you with a generic documentation for those.
Yeah.
And this is comparing to CloudFormation in Amazon, it's like a completely different story.
Yeah. There is a reason for that in Azure, because Azure grows very fast. So, for instance, if you leave your work on Friday and you forget to close your Azure account portal, and you just on Monday you just hit refresh button, you will see new input boxes in the same forum. For instance, I was surprised that like 2 days ago it wasn't possible to name your front-end IP address in load balancer. It's like used default name for front-end IP address. But when I clicked refresh on Monday, I've seen an input box for name. It was a cool surprise, and I have and I forced to rewrite all my documents I created before.
So you get the same situation, you couldn't keep up with the documentation of the services. Right? Yeah. Okay.
I had a question about the transaction limitation you said for DynamoDB versus DynamoDB. What was that again?
So, speaking specifically for Azure Table in DynamoDB this year,
Yeah.
for Azure Table, Amazon, Microsoft claims they can process 2,000 requests per second.
Okay.
For DynamoDB, I believe it's like 20,000 by default, and you can ask Amazon if you need it.
Yeah,
And in addition to that, the request imposed by Azure is per account.
yeah. What I recommend to you to go over the Azure side,
Yeah.
because you can see that as comparison service by service, and you can click through services that Azure offers, so you can see alternatives. So in this specific example, they put for DynamoDB they put two alternatives. DocumentDB and table storage based on your use case. You still have to do your analysis, your hard work of identifying what you actually need, and then you have to come up with a service. Okay?
Yeah, but speaking to answer, to clarify your answer, it actually means that you have to be expert both in Azure and AWS. Otherwise, your comparison will be valid.
Yeah, what I did, I have a different group, Amazon, and a different group, Azure, and I was the liaison between them to validate and then validate the analysis, and everybody agreed there was valid points. Okay, should we move on? That's going to be different animal. Bigger, you want to stay there or forget to say that? This is the different company, I call it Smart Golf, and this is not an established company, it's a startup. And in the startup, they were saying, okay, we have this idea, we need to build a product, and what cloud we should choose. So it's just a empty plate, and you just go over and discuss possibilities. I use the same framework, cloud, internal expertise, and business drivers. So the main point for you to remember, if you want to do the analysis, which is really tiresome, I recommend you to have this structure, how you think through your objectives. So you think through three main categories: cloud capabilities, your IT expertise, as well as business drivers. And when you end up having this all together interlocked, you have your best cloud option here. Okay? So in this case, it was pretty simple use case. They were saying, for cloud, we just need to envision architecture. For IT expertise, we'll just ask each bank to provide expertise. And for business drivers, what is the cheapest option, right? So if I reduce that, what we come up with is just that, okay, we have Azure and Amazon team here, so it's not a problem for us. For architecture, we will provide architecture. We'll ask our Amazon architect and Azure architect to come up with alternatives. And for business drivers, okay, we'll do price comparison. And what we did, we just typed the business objective of the courses to the consumption of the cloud. And then we did the architecture on Amazon as well on Azure. And what was based on price, we saw that not so much of a difference. So it is significant in scaled Azure TCO a little bit cheaper than Amazon, but it wasn't the main factor because it wasn't enough money there in differences. So as you see now, we're saying, okay, for your architecture, we know we can support it in Azure and Amazon. For business drivers, pretty much the same TCO. And for startups, if you might consider that for your work, both of them, Amazon and Azure, provide additional packages or discounts for startups. And in this case, they were not eligible for Amazon as well for Azure. So no big difference there. What ended up having is just internal technology expertise, and for us in that specific moment, we know we had available team on Amazon, so we recommended, okay, let's go to Amazon. It was pretty simple use case, okay? But the main point to show this use case to you is just having this methodology that you have this 3 category that you systematically go through with your customer or with yourself to identify your cloud solution. Question on this one?
How do you decide like what performance-wise? I mean that's a big deal, right? Like the performance of the dollar per performance, I guess.
And by performance you mean?
Like number of courses, I think. Your table, it's 10, 100, and 1,000.
So like this, like metrics for a course? Is that the question? No?
Yeah, I would say you figured that out through benchmarks and things.
Yeah, because we had some additional requirements that I haven't put in there. Like it was IT solution, we had devices with specific requirements, and we saw how many courses we need to support, how many players are there, and the frequency of the messaging from the devices to the hub. So that was behind the scene of that. So, but I haven't gone through this all details.
Okay.
Okay, so you ready for summary? Okay, so which is the best, right? I just pulled this over 2016 diagrams. Maybe you've seen them before. It's the famous consultancy. They do Gartner. They do compare. They do analysis of different services around. And as you see now, this first one is the infrastructure as a service. And as of August 2016, they put Amazon as the leader in terms of execution and the vision. And we see Microsoft a little bit behind on the vision, but it has more gap in execution, right? If you go over to platform as a service, we don't have Amazon here. But we do have Salesforce, and this is the first year when they put the Microsoft as the leader in terms of vision, but we still have a gap between execution between Salesforce and Microsoft, right? So how do you interpret this data? Based on the feedback from developers and the customers, I interpret this gap in execution is the quality of documentation and stability of the system. But it's just my interpretation. But we still have that, right? What I'm curious, and I think we will have a discussion next year, is the comparison with the Google. Now the kind of visionary here and challengers are here, so I would just make a forecast. Next year we'll do comparison Amazon, Azure, and Google. That's why I think it's essential to have the methodology. How do you perform the kind of analysis? Price-wise, this is second summary, the takeaway. We proved that there is a big difference between the pricing. How do you